Welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. With over 20 years of real estate experience and selling over 150 homes a year, Laura Sanders is the #1 RE/MAX agent in the state of Florida for 2021. Join us each week as we discuss how to make money through buying and flipping homes to renting versus selling and everything in between. To join the conversation, call in live 888-994-4995, Studio A.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. Every week we talk about something that can help you make a little money, save a little money, or just help you navigate this crazy world that we live in. Today we're here with Charles Esposito. He is one of the amazing attorneys at JK Closings, and we're going to talk about the questions that everybody has. Sellers are going, do I have to pay commission? The agents are going, are you going to pay commission? So with that being said, welcome CJ or Charles, wherever you like to go.
Thanks for having me, Laura. How's it going?
Good. So we have a lot of controversy going on right now. Articles are coming out stating that, and we've started talking about this before, and I know people are looking for updates. We've talked about what's going on with this buyer-broker agreement, this huge lawsuit that seems to be a bunch of wasted money. People are saying that, I don't have to pay the buyer's agent anymore.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is they were never really paying the buyer's agent. That was a marketing fee that the listing agent was utilizing out of the fee that was charged directly to the owner.
Yeah, I like the way that you categorize that. So basically there's a lawsuit it's a class action lawsuit, a bunch of buyers and sellers basically going against the Realtor Association, and there was a judgment against the National Association of Realtors, and then there's a settlement agreement. And that settlement agreement has the Department of Justice involved, and the outcome of that is now cooperating broker compensation is no longer going to be on the MLS, meaning when you list a property, it's not going to show how much the seller is offering to the cooperating broker. And that means the buyer's agent. The interesting thing about that is, for those of us that are real estate professionals, it was always the seller agreed with the listing agent as to what the compensation was going to be, and whether that is a percentage or a flat rate or whatever it would be, then you as the listing agent offered a portion of that to a buyer's agent.
Right.
Because you're basically using that, like you said, to market the property. And it stands to reason that if you're offering a buyer's agent compensation for bringing a buyer to you, you'll get more buyers, you'll get more qualified buyers, you'll be off the market faster, and there's data to support that. So this lawsuit kind of didn't make a lot of sense to those of us in the real estate industry, but it happened, and now there's a settlement agreement. So no longer will the seller be offering cooperating broker compensation on the MLS, but it doesn't mean that they won't be offering it at all.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that it's illegal to offer it at all.
Right. Yeah.
So there was a New York Times article that said, do I have to offer the buyer's agent, or do I have to pay the buyer's agent's compensation? And the answer to that has always been no. The seller has never had to do that.
Right.
It just made a lot of sense financially as part of the transaction to structure the transaction that way. And if we think about it, if the buyer's agent's compensation is paid for by the seller, that means it's paid for out of the purchase price, which means that if a buyer is financing the transaction, then the money that they're going to pay the buyer's agent goes to the seller first, it goes through the lender, and it gets financed, and then the buyer's agent gets paid. So the buyer actually has to spend less money when it happens like that. If the buyer pays their buyer's agent directly, then they have to bring more money to closing.
Which is hard to do.
Much harder to do.
They're barely coming with what they need, right?
So the big misconception about this is that the sellers cannot pay for the buyer's agent's compensation after this settlement agreement, but that's not true. Of course they can. They can still do that. That's one of the huge misconceptions about this settlement agreement. And then the other thing that I actually think is the bigger outcome of this settlement agreement is that buyers will have to sign agreements with buyer's agents to go look at properties. And that, I think, is going to be a huge change. No, I think it's going to be a great thing. I think it's going to professionalize the industry, and I think it's going to be really good for realtors like you that actually do, you know, help out their buyers and actually go and run around and do all the things that you're supposed to do. And that, I think, is going to be a big help for buyers.
But how do you, so you know how like a lot of buyers will call off the MLS? Like they'll go on to Zillow and they'll call us directly, and then they're like, well, we want to pay less commission. How are we going to handle that? Because they're not going to sign a buyer broker agreement because they only want to see that one property with us.
Right. So you're coming at it from the buyer side if you're a buyer agent.
No, but we're the listing agent.
You're the listing.
I'm
okay.
The listing agent.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify.
And people,
okay.
And people all the time will call us directly because they feel that if they come to us directly, they won't have to pay us a commission.
Right. Well, I mean, the answer to that is that it's a fallacy. When you're talking to a buyer, if you go directly to the listing agent has already signed an agreement with the seller as to how much they're going to get paid.
Right.
They don't have to get paid less just because the buyer's asking them or thinks that that's how it's going to happen.
They do think that.
Right, buyers do think that, and it's a big misconception. I mean, the listing agent sets the price on you know, whatever they're offering with the seller, and the buyer's agent usually knows what the market dictates. Why, as a buyer, would you not want somebody who's an industry professional to help you figure out what that property is worth? You know, there's certain communities that you work in a lot. You know about those communities and you know what the houses sell for and everything. Do buyers know about that? Probably not.
Right.
You know, so I think it's a big fallacy that buyers think that they're going to spend less money on a house if they don't have a buyer's agent. Why would the seller's agent reduce the amount of money that they're going to get paid? They don't need to.
So if they do come to us directly, do they have to sign something with us? Is that going to be a new law, like that they have to sign?
Does the
like
buyer need to sign with a listing agent?
Right, something if they're coming to look at the property prior to. Just because remember we used to have that transaction broker form that used to need to be signed, and then they got rid of that. That was like the dealing honestly, accounting for all funds.
As of right now, the requirement is going to be that buyers have to sign an agreement with buyer's agents. If you are the listing agent, as of right now, there's no form for the buyer to sign with the listing agent, but also when a contract is submitted, a lot of listing agents now, they put themselves on the buyer side of the contract too and act as transaction brokers.
Right.
You don't need to do that though on a contract. So I'm not 100% sure that the listing agent has to sign something with the buyer, although I think it's always good practice for agents to do that because then it can prevent another agent from coming in and representing a buyer. So I do recommend to agents to do that. But for buyers in general, I always recommend that they work with a realtor. You have no idea how much time your realtors actually spend on transactions.
I guess I'm really concerned because there's a lot of things that are going to happen, right?
Yeah.
For instance, like let's say you call me, you're the buyer, right? You call me and you say, I want to see your house at 123 Main Street, right?
Yep.
My first question is, are you working with a realtor?
Yeah.
If they say yes, well then that's great. You need to have your realtor set up an appointment and they need to show you. If they say, oh, my realtor is away for the weekend, right? I mean, do we need to start asking to see these brokers agreements before showing? I mean, how?
Yeah, well, as a listing agent, you're going to need to, because here's the other thing. The National Association of Realtors has said, if you as a buyer's agent sign a buyer agreement that says you're limited to a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage of the purchase price. Let's say you've agreed with your buyer that they're not going to have to pay you more than $5,000 on this transaction.
Okay.
Okay. But let's say that your seller is offering $10,000. The buyer's agent cannot collect more than $5,000 now, and that's what the National Association of Realtors has done to protect buyers, and then also to protect agents too from places that come in and are low flat fee or low percentage to just snipe buyers.
So basically it needs to say that you're collecting 3%, and if the property is offering 2, the buyer will pay the difference of 1.
Yeah, so
and then
buyers
you can make it your choice to
like
waive that 1% if you wanted to.
Yeah, you can always modify a buyer agreement to change the amount of compensation that you're receiving as a buyer's agent. So let's say, for instance, that your fee, you know, some agents always say, well, I collect $10,000 no matter what the purchase price is on a transaction, you know, because I do the same amount of work, whether it's a $50,000 condo or a $5 million transaction, whatever it is. That's not how most agents work.
Imagine $5 million and
you
you're
know?
only taking 10?
Yeah, but you could.
Yeah.
And if you cannot write your buyer agreement to state that you as an agent, a buyer's agent, are going to get paid whatever the seller is offering. That's very clear. You're not allowed to say that. Okay. So it needs to have finite numbers on it. Now, are you allowed to put a minimum and a maximum? We don't know the answer to that yet. We're going to find out. There's going to be all sorts of different...
This is very stressful.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different things that are going to change with this. And some of it I think will help buyers, and some of it I think will act to the detriment of buyers too, that maybe the DOJ didn't really think about, but we'll see.
Okay. So I want to go to commercial break, but when we come back, I want to talk about, because I have to tell you, I'm confused. I never understood, what the hell does the DOJ, where does that come in? And could you explain that to us? So let's go to commercial break. We're going to see our wonderful sponsors commercials, and when we come back, CJ's going to explain to me because I'm confused. I never understood that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Whether you're buying, selling, refinancing, or building your dream home, you have a lot riding on your loan specialist. Max Fish, a top 1% mortgage loan officer in the nation, will give you a same-day qualifying quote. Max Fish is committed to providing his customers with mortgage services that exceed their expectations. Ensuring that you make the right choice for you and your family is his ultimate goal. Contact Max Fish today at 954-729-6933 or max.fisch@nwmcorp.net.
At JK Closing Attorneys, we do all of the same things that a title company does, but with the benefits of being a law office. We can help with residential real estate, short sales, commercial real estate, refinances, 1031 exchanges, and FIRPTA withholding.
Contact JK Closing Attorneys today at 954-332-3111. Again, that is 954-332-3111.
You have been watching Making Money with Laura. For more information, contact Laura Sanders at 954-650-0827 or visit her website at lauraess.com. And now back to the show.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Making Money with Laura Sanders. We're here talking about all these new laws that are coming into place with the buyer-broker agreement, and we're talking about the antitrust laws that are in effect because of this, what they think we're colluding together, us realtors, because yeah, we're smart enough to do that. I mean,
or dumb enough, depending on your perspective
seriously.
of it.
But we're here with Charles Esposito. He is one of the lawyers at JK Closings, and we're talking about my confusion on, I was like, how does the Department of Justice get involved here? And he's like, it's because you guys are, you know, it's coercion, right? Like
Yeah, antitrust laws. So the Department of Justice has been angling for years to try to prove that realtors have been price fixing. And that means, you know, when you sell a home, realtors come up with a percentage of the purchase price that they are owed. And a lot of realtors will say that they are entitled to at least 6% of the transaction. That's what this lawsuit was about. And the Department of Justice has been trying to essentially prove that for years and tried to get the National Association of Realtors on antitrust violations. And again, for those of us in the industry, it doesn't really make sense because we see compensation all over the place. I mean, there's people that do 1% listings, which we always say, you know, to sellers, you get what you pay for, exactly. Yeah. If you think that you're going to get good service from somebody that's only listing your property for 1%, think again. Or one of those flat rate places that charges like $500, you know, who's going to be answering all those phone calls when buyers start calling up? Who's going to be scheduling all the people, you know? So that's what this lawsuit was about. And, you know, I kind of jokingly said before, maybe you're dumb enough to price fix as realtors, but there were a lot of realtors that went online on social media and they started complaining about not getting paid enough and that they should be getting paid X percentage, they should be getting paid for this. And in this lawsuit, those types of remarks were used to get a judgment against the National Association of Realtors and certain brokerages. There ended up being a settlement agreement though. So a giant one, yeah, and it is going to change some things nationally, and then in Florida, some of the rules and laws for realtors are going to change. But ultimately, the two major changes is no more cooperating broker compensation on the MLS, and buyers agents are going to have to sign agreements with buyers.
Okay, so I laugh because you're saying about fixing, right? Don't you think, this is just my common sense, like I think I have some. Don't you think it makes sense to like say like, because it's not always 6%, but use 6% and saying, well, most often standard industry, most people typically charge 6%. However,
that would be the type of language that got realtors into that lawsuit.
Okay, but think about it.
There is no standard specific
but
industry rate.
What's usury for like credit card interest rate, right? In certain states.
Yeah.
Right? So if you say like, oh, you can't charge more than 6%, anything over 6% would be considered usury. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And if somebody says, I'm hard and fast, I want the 6% and I don't want to negotiate, that's between the owner and the realtor. The owner has the choice to go and interview another agent.
Right. Well, and again, that's, sellers have always been able to negotiate how much they're going to pay in compensation for listing agents and for buyer agents. So that's why this lawsuit doesn't really make a lot of sense to industry professionals, but it is what it is, and there are some changes coming from it. And one of the reasons why realtors got into this lawsuit is because so many of them did say there is a standard and there is a specific amount, even though there's not. But enough of them said that there was, that they ended up losing this lawsuit.
So would you
and there were multiple lawsuits. They didn't lose all of the lawsuits.
Right. But would you say then that you would say, well, most realtors have been charging 6%, but I'm going to charge you 5%?
Yeah, I saying most people do
people
this,
ask, they go, well, what's the commission rate, right?
Yeah, there's no standard set rate. I mean, you have what you think you're worth.
Realtors were charging, and you could say, but I'm willing to do it for this for you. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, that type of stuff has been happening right along, though.
Yeah.
A standard example for this type of thing is an agent would say, listen, if I end up bringing the buyer too, you don't have to pay me the full percentage that I have on here. Right. So let's say you had 10% as a listing agreement commission, right? And then you brought the buyer and said, well, listen, I'm only going to charge you 5% if I bring the buyer. That's an agreement that you have with the seller, and that's going to be in your listing agreement too. So none of that stuff is going to change. The compensation is going to be in the listing agreements. What is going to change is that buyers agents will have to talk to listing agents to figure out what the seller's offering.
Nightmare. They don't answer their phone as it is. Now you got to get them to, to say, hey, are you paying a compensation? I mean, I went on a listing appointment a couple of weeks ago. The lady was like, I don't want to pay. So I had all the sheets and I showed her, I go, this is all the people around you and this is what they're offering out. So use that as what your competition is doing.
Right, and that's a very smart way to go about it with sellers from a realtor perspective. We know that sellers that offer cooperating broker compensation, they sell their houses for more money, they're on the market for fewer days, and they get more qualified buyers, meaning they have fewer cancellations. And that's because a buyer's agent, who is an industry professional, is vetting a buyer, and they are able to talk to a buyer about what a house is worth. And then they're able to get that buyer qualified with a lender. They're able to introduce them to inspectors and appraisers and all different vendors, attorneys that are going to help close that transaction. And when buyers are not represented, they get bad advice because they have no one actually giving them advice.
Sellers
and they're less
give
likely to
themselves
close.
Bad advice. Like they'll take offers. I think you even told me you had one like this where the insurance superseded what the buyer qualified for. So then they get down to the end and it's like they don't even qualify anymore.
Right.
Because people aren't taking into account that whatever your insurance is today isn't what the person's insurance is going to be tomorrow.
Yeah, and taxes as well. So we talked about that with insurance, where somebody who has owned a house, let's say in Palm Beach County, for years and years and years, and their insurance gradually increased over time, but it didn't increase a lot. Well, if that house is being sold for $1 million now, where the owner of the property bought it for $500,000, the insurance is going to be double or triple what it was, 10 years ago. You mean? The insurance and the taxes.
Yeah.
Because if you have to insure a property that is worth $1 million versus a property that's worth $500,000, the insurance is going to cost more. So buyers that are not represented by buyer's agents, if they're not getting advice from somebody,
right,
how do you know as a listing agent and as a seller whether or not that person's even qualified?
And let's be honest, and as the realtor, as the representing attorney for these buyers, if they say, or the sellers, and the seller comes to you and says, hey CJ, I'd like you to write my contract, I have my own buyer, you'll be willing to do that. However, you're not going to sit there and say, well, let me help make sure your insurance is going to qualify. Let me help make sure that, that they're qualified. Let me talk to their lender. If they want to pay you $300 or $400 an hour to do those additional things, they can.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've had to take over transactions where buyers and sellers tried to do that, and their attorneys had already charged them. In one case, I remember it was $2,500, and they didn't even have a contract yet. And I sat down and did the contract with them in my office together, even though we could have done it electronically.
Right.
And we do that type of thing for free if we're working on the transaction. We'll put together the contract.
Right.
But all of the other things that realtors do, we don't do that. We don't vet the property. We don't go do inspections. We don't even,
Yeah, like if their roof is 30 years old, you wouldn't be saying to the seller that asked you to write the contract, hey, by the way, your roof is 30 years old. When you get through done with the inspections, they're probably going to want some kind of credit for your roof.
Right. That we'll answer questions for our clients, but we're not involved in the transaction on a day-to-day basis like that. That's what you guys are for.
Yep. And that's the thing, I always say, I'm an expert in condos and manipulating insurance or kind of walking you through all these little things. So that is kind of where we're having an issue with this whole commission.
Yeah, it ultimately comes down to what are realtors worth and do they have a value? And the thing is, realtors have been competing against all these, low-end places, 1% places, flat fee places, and ultimately there are still a ton of realtors that are out there earning the money that they're owed because they're spending so much time on these transactions for their sellers and their buyers, and they're worth it. If you really have to go through an hour, the hours spent on a transaction that realtors spend, you look at it from the seller's perspective or the buyer's perspective, it's like a full-time job. Right. So that's what you're hiring the realtor for. And then the realtor has experience in transactions, so all of these different connections that realtors have, they're putting their clients in touch with them. And for you to do that on your own is an enormous undertaking. If I was going to buy a house, I would have a realtor representing me because I don't want to spend the time doing all of the stuff that they're going to get paid to do. I have a full-time job already. Right. So it's not really smart for clients to not have a realtor, and we see that all the time. For sale by owners, we see that all the time. You guys as realtors are able to contact for sale by owners, get them under contract yourselves, and actually earn a compensation package on it where they went and listed their own property and didn't want to pay anyone anything. But you are still able to do that because they realize how difficult it actually is to sell a home.
We're doing a job for both sides.
Yeah.
But so what's a good way to reach out to you if somebody needs help with whether they be an agent or a seller or a buyer and they want to contact an attorney? What would be a good way to get a hold of you?
Call or text 954-779-5000. Email legal@jkclosings.com. We review as-is contracts, Florida residential as-is contracts for free. And we also speak with realtors and buyers and sellers on transactions when you have any questions.
And agents, let me just tell you that if you give enough closings to JK Closings, they have the best Halloween party. That's coming up soon. I don't know if you're going to do it at the same place again.
We do have a great Halloween party.
They
we have
do.
a Realtor
So
appreciation
it's definitely
party.
the best Realtor appreciation party. So if your agents are listening, you definitely want to reach out to CJ and find out how you can become part of that. And if you're looking for the best Realtor out there, it would definitely be me. You know, we are a dime a dozen, but I'm at least a quarter. Laura Sanders, 954-650-0827, and that's laurassell.com. And we look forward to letting you hear us again next Thursday. Have a great night.
Thank you for tuning in for Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. To join the conversation, call us at the studio, 888-994-4995 Studio A, or contact Laura directly at 954-650-0827.